All right. Good afternoon and welcome on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Frederick and Montgomery Counties and Hood College. I would like to welcome you to the Congressional 8 debate. The Democratic debate will be first, followed by the Republican at 5:55. I am Elaine Apter on the State Board of the League of Women Voters. The League has been educating voters for almost 100 years on issues and candidates. We are nonpartisan, and we just want to let you know that our interactive voters guide is at Vote 411, where you can look up the candidates. We have cards outside. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Hoda Zaki, who is the representative from the Frederick League of Women Voters.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out in the driving rain. It's a beautiful day for Hood College to be able to welcome all of you. And I am on the board of the League of Women Voters of Frederick County. And I also happen to be a professor of political science at Hood College. And I am going to want you to help me to welcome the president of Hood College, President Andrea Chapdelaine, who is a stalwart supporter of public service and civic engagement. And she will say a few introductory words of welcome. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. I am delighted to welcome all of you to Hood College. I will just keep my remarks very brief because I know that the interest is to my right. So we're delighted to be able to participate and support the League of Women Voters of Maryland by hosting this very important debate. As we know, colleges and universities have played a critical role in the political process by hosting such debates and encouraging open and civil discourse. It's an important opportunity for our students to be able to be here today and to watch the political process in action. As Hoda mentioned, civic engagement and public service has been an important message that I have been emphasizing. It's been a long history of Hood College, and I'm interested in furthering that conversation going forward. We need students who are civically engaged, understand their responsibility of citizenship, and will be active participants in the political process. And today is a wonderful way to model and involve them in that process. So again, I hope you enjoy your time here with us. Come back often. I want to say to all of the candidates, you are welcome anytime. If you'd like to come back and speak to our students, we would absolutely be delighted to have you. So thank you and enjoy.
Hi, everybody. I'm Robert McCartney. I'm a writer, longtime writer for the Washington Post, and I'm the moderator of this debate. The candidates can take their seats. Just a few housekeeping matters. First, I want to thank Hood College. We all should thank Hood College and the League of Women Voters for organizing this debate. It's a particular honor for me to participate because my mother was a longtime active member of the League of Women Voters and an official in Illinois at the local level of the League. My late mother, I should say. I should say that the questions for this debate, which will be an hour and a half, were selected by the League of Women Voters, by students at Hood College, and by me. The questions, you'll have one, there's so many of us, so many of you running for this position, that the answers are going to have to be limited to 1 minute. And our ace timekeeper, Adrian, sitting in the front, will keep them honest on this. She will hold up a card for 15 seconds left and then stop. And there'll be a buzzer, I believe, of some sort, which you're all going to get used to, telling you to finish your sentence and let us go on. Please, the order it was selected by lot that the Democrats would go before the Republicans, and it was selected by lot how they were going to sit. And we'll start at the end with Senator Barvey.
Delegate Barvey, don't demote.
Excuse me, Delegate Barber, I apologize. And then come down, and then we'll start the next time with Mr. Bowling. Is he here?
No.
No, Mr. Bowling's not here. Okay, Dan Bowling is not here, so I should cross him off my list here. Then we'll start next time with Mr. Trone, and then come down. So basically, everybody will get a chance to go first, and everyone will get a chance to go last. Please speak into the mics, I was told to tell you, so that everybody can hear you. And we will be taking questions from the audience on cards, which this woman will be, Diane? Diane will be picking up, and please write legibly. So you will have a 1-minute closing statement at the end, but in lieu of having an opening statement, we're just going to ask a sort of open-ended question, and everybody gets a 1-minute answer. So starting with Delegate Barvey, what areas in your, and everybody will have this question, what areas in your past work or job experience make you uniquely qualified both to represent District 8 and to be effective in the U.S. Congress?
Okay, well, first of all, it's wonderful to be here. My name is Kumar Barvey, and in addition to being a member of the Maryland General Assembly, where I've served as majority leader, I'm an accountant and the chief financial officer of an environmental company in Rockville, Maryland. And as an accountant and as a liberal Democrat, I have the unique ability to combine those two skills. And in particular, one area of interest for me is the fact that in the United States we have 4 million unfilled jobs in our economy because we as a nation have chosen to really ignore training people and getting them ready for these kinds of jobs in our economy. And I just want to talk about one particular program that as a legislator and as an accountant I helped to implement, and that was the Technology Development Corporation, which according to the Daily Record has spurred nearly $1 billion in economic activity, created 5,000 jobs in Maryland, and did them their average $70,000 a year. That's putting technology to work for our middle class. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. And now David Trone.
If you're looking for a typical politician, that's certainly, I'm not your guy. My background is business. I grew up not far from Frederick here on a farm in Adams County, Pennsylvania, little town of East Berlin. I understand a rural economy. I lived there for decades. That farm failed, and through that failure, I learned about hard work, but I also learned about what it takes to lift yourself up and go from there. Since that point in time, I've went into business for myself, supported my mom and younger siblings, and built a business that's now in 21 states with 150 stores, and it's the largest retailer of wine and beer in the United States. But most importantly, I've created 5,000 jobs. So I understand and get jobs, health care, and how everyone in America needs to move forward and need to break the gridlock in D.C. by working across the aisle, Republicans and Democrats, as Americans.
Thank you. Now David Anderson.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. For the last 11 years, I've worked with Democrats and Republicans in 20 states to raise money for college students to come to Washington for semester-long internships. So I'm currently Senior Vice President of State Relations at the Washington Center for Internships. Prior to this nonprofit organization, which makes me work in the practical political world, I was an academic. So I taught at George Washington University for 12 years and 5 other universities. I have a PhD in philosophy from the University of Michigan. The area that I've worked on the most, starting in the 1980s when I did my dissertation, is family policy. And I've written about family policy on and off the last 25 years, and my national family policy is actually the centerpiece of my campaign. I taught it 32 semesters to graduate students at GW, and now I'm running on it, and I'll talk about it during this debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. William Jawando.
And Will is fine going forward. But
Will Jawando.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. The question was, how are we uniquely qualified? I'm going to give you three things since we're at a college, so 3 points to take away. One, life experience. I grew up in Silver Spring, the son of a Nigerian immigrant, white Kansan mother, my dad came to this country fleeing a civil war. They split when I was young, and we didn't have a lot of money. I had to earn scholarships to school, law school, and college. When I was 12 years old, defining moment for me, I lost one of my best friends to gun violence. I know what it means to have tragedy in your life, and that's why I got into public service. Number two, federal policy experience. I've worked for Nancy Pelosi, Senator Obama, Sherrod Brown, in the White House with President Obama, where I helped pass health care and Lilly Ledbetter Act for equal pay. I've also worked at the Department of Education and Discovery Communications. Three, diversity. In this seat, right now, for this district, we have 3 white men running that are currently representing the Montgomery County area. I think we need some diversity in this seat. I think it's not just because diversity is important, it's because it changes the conversation in the room. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jawando. Joel Rubin.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having us today. I come from a family of strong women. I live with my 3 young daughters, my mother-in-law, my wife who's a congressional aide. We're multi-generational, multi-ethnic, and I've had a career of public service. I started as a Peace Corps volunteer nearly 20 years ago and have been working in the public sector and as an advocate and an activist since that time. Most recently, I was the senior official at the State Department in charge of our work with the House of Representatives, and we fought to get things done and get real results with the House of Representatives, the body where we all want to serve. In particular, I worked actively for the last 8 years to promote diplomacy with Iran, and we secured an agreement and got it through the House. And this demonstrates a track record of success and work. I'm excited to have the opportunity to represent you and work with you in the House and with the House. There are great things we can do, and there are a lot of challenges ahead, and I look forward to the discussion this afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Rubin. Kathleen Matthews.
Good afternoon, everybody, and it's great to see a lot of my new friends in the audience and also be back on the campus of Hood College. I came here when I was a news reporter for ABC7, Channel 7 WJLA, covering stories in this area, in Frederick County, but throughout the D.C. metro area, as an education reporter, covering breaking news, all the issues that really are critical to this area. And I bring that local knowledge of what this area needs and the challenges it faces, but also global experience, working for the past 9 years for Marriott International, a homegrown company based in Bethesda, Maryland, but with operations and hotels in 80 countries around the world. And reporting to the CEO for the past 9 years, I was working to create new jobs, development, but also opportunity for women, children around the world and in the U.S. to move into new jobs in the hotel industry. I also brought experience in environmental sustainability, and these are the unique things I think I bring to the race, in addition to being a woman, and I believe we need more women in Congress. Right now, Congress is only 20% women, and I think more diverse voices around the table is going to result in breaking the gridlock and better results.
Thank you, Ms. Matthews. Delegate Ana Sol Gutierrez.
Good morning, good afternoon. I believe what makes me uniquely qualified is who I am and what I've been doing with my life. I am a woman, a mother, a single mom, and a grandmother now. I have 6 grandchildren. I am an engineer that was the product of Montgomery County Public Education and have worked for over 35 years in the IT industry. I am also an immigrant. I am from El Salvador and have had the fortune of living in Europe and working in Geneva, Switzerland, as well as living in Bolivia, Peru, and Venezuela. I have a global view of issues in the world, but I am also very rooted here in Montgomery County. I've represented Montgomery County for 14 years, both at the state level and at the local level, with 8 years on the school board and 14 years in Annapolis. Thank you. I hope I get a chance to talk about the experience in further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Gutierrez. Senator Jamie Raskin.
Thank you much. So I'm a professor of constitutional law at American University in Washington. I teach constitutional law, First Amendment, and legislative process, and a seminar on political leadership. 10 years ago, I was elected to the state Senate. All the pundits said that my chances were impossible because I ran against a 32-year incumbent. After we got 69% of the vote in the primary, all the pundits said that my victory was inevitable. So I went from impossible to inevitable. And that's been much the story of my legislative career as well. Everything that I campaigned on when I first ran for office, we've gotten done. And I not only introduced, but I was the floor leader for marriage equality. We passed marriage equality in Maryland, and the voters defended it at the polls. We passed abolition of the death penalty, which I introduced, and I was the floor leader for that. We passed the Second Chance Act, where we restored more than 275,000 Marylanders the possibility of getting back in the job market. We passed the Green Maryland Act. We restored voting rights to ex-felons. We banned military-style assault weapons, which I introduced after the slaughter that took place in Newtown, Connecticut. So that's the record, the Maryland way, that I want to take to Washington as your member of Congress.
Okay, thank you. I understand, I'm told that Dan Bowling is here. He's on his way.
We could just wait for him.
I think that would be a waste of time. Mr. Bowling will join us when he gets here. So now the next question is about gerrymandering, which is an issue that has gotten a lot of attention at previous debates, and is one that of great interest, in particular to the League of Women Voters, but also to anybody in the state of Maryland who is following the issues. As you all know, when the redistricting map was drawn for Maryland, we got one of the most gerrymandered states in the country. It has been judged the ugliest example of gerrymandering in the country. It was done deliberately in order to squeeze out a Republican seat, and it succeeded in squeezing out a Republican seat and shifting the balance in Congress, reducing the number of Republican seats in Congress from Maryland from 2 to 1. Now, 3 of you, Senator Raskin and Delegates Barve and Sol Gutierrez, actually had to vote on this. The others did not, so I'm going to ask slightly different questions based on whether you had to vote on it or not. But starting with Mr. Trone, and for the others who didn't have to vote on it, would you have opposed that map or supported it? Would you have opposed it on grounds that it was ugly and unfair? Or would you have supported it on grounds that it was the only way for the Democrats to keep pace with the Republicans, given gerrymandering that they practice in other states?
I strongly would have opposed gerrymandering. Either you do what's right and follow principle, or you go along to get along with your fellow politicians. It's an abomination what the Republicans and the Democrats, were both guilty together, have done to America. It's led to the malaise we have today throughout the country, with the polarization to the left and the polarization to the right, where no one is meeting in the middle to try and work, again, as Americans to solve problems. Gerrymandering, and when you lay on top of that the money from the lobbyists, the money from the PACs, you have the major problem in America: no communication, no progress, and without question, it's a major issue here that we should have addressed and needs to be addressed by a national commission. Silly ideas like a Potomac PAC with Maryland and Virginia, what a waste of time and rhetoric.
I'm going to ask a follow-up question. So you're saying that they shouldn't have voted that way before, but it's quite possible that there would not be a federal commission. So if the same kind of thing came up again, would you vote for it or against it, absent a federal commission or a Potomac PAC or some other way of having some kind of equity in behavior by Republicans and Democrats in different states? How would you vote if it came up again without the federal commission that you're calling for?
You could never vote for gerrymandering. People need to be grouped by natural boundaries done by independent, nonpartisan commissions. A couple of states have done that, and that's where we need to be. And it's just craziness to think that the politicians can pick their voters. I thought the voters picked the politicians. That's not the way it seems to work.
Mr. Anderson.
Well, it's a good question. I do know the pressure that the legislators were under, but I'd have to say if I was in that position, no, I would have opposed. I mean, I taught ethics and politics at George Washington University for 12 years. This is a no-brainer. We should not have the redistricting, decided by each state, because then if it's a state where there's a great deal of power that one party has, like in Maryland, it's traditionally the Democrats, in Texas, it's the Republicans, then no, then this becomes very unfair, and it does lead to polarization in Washington, seats that stay with those parties, and it leads to gridlock. So how to solve the problem? Sure. I mean, we should try and have federal law. It's hard to do this. It is hard, but there are many times that the states have been laboratories of change. And there are 9 states now, I believe it is, that do have impartial boards. So we're not going to get that done in Maryland. That means we would have to get it done in Washington. And I would fight for the impartial boards.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Will Jawando.
Great question, and it's core to this race. I would have adamantly voted against it for several reasons, and I'm going to make them close to home for people up here in Frederick. I just went to 3 churches this morning, and 2 were African American churches and 1 wasn't. I see some people that were at some of the churches, and the people that live in Frederick City were bemoaning and were mad about the fact that they couldn't vote for me because they were gerrymandered out. And this district goes around Frederick City, and I'm going to tell you why, because it's majority people of color that live in Frederick City. And those votes were taken. So that's the one of the many bad effects. It disenfranchises communities of color. I'll give you another example. We were up in Thurmont, different parts of the state, northern Maryland, rural versus suburban. This district stretches from the DC line to almost the Pennsylvania line, and you have different interests there, and that's not good for those people. And I think if you have a principle that you stand for, you have to vote for it. Things in Congress are hard. Trust me, I work there, I know. This gerrymandering, there's 435 House seats. Only 90 are purple seats because of gerrymandering. The rest are either solidly Republican or solidly Democrat. That's wrong, that's not American.
So again, just to follow up, just to be clear, yes or no, if it came up again, and would you place principle over partisan pragmatism and vote against the gerrymandering even though you were hurting the Democratic Party?
It is a Democratic principle to stand up against gerrymandering. So the answer is yes, I would have voted against the map.
Thank you, Mr. Jawando. Joel Rubin.
Well, I agree with that entirely. As Democrats, we should have the courage of our convictions that we're going to win elections based upon the idea that we have the better concepts, the better policies, and the better ideas. When I worked as the senior official of the State Department dealing with the House of Representatives, it was very clear to us about who would and who would not be with us, because we knew if their districts were so focused either hard red or hard blue. And so we worked on the purple districts a lot more. It basically inhibits compromise. And that's not good for American democracy. And I think as progressives, that's what we should be standing for. My wife actually, on an aside, she bought me the map and put it up on the wall of our house to show me how messed up it was. And my daughters, my 3 young daughters, tried to have me make sense of it to actually explain why it's shaped the way it is. And I couldn't, of course. And even in my house, my wife is a Republican congressional aide. And we talk about this a lot. Neither of us want gerrymandering. I think it's a very bad idea.
Thank you, Mr. Rubin. Kathleen Matthews.
I want to salute Ana Sol Gutierrez because she is the only legislator on the stage who voted against it. I would have voted against it before, and I would vote against it going forward. Whether it's a Democratic legislature or a Republican legislature, these gerrymandered maps are the result of an old boys network protecting themselves. We need a national commission going forward. We've got to do this across the country to take a look at how we can solve this problem, because this is what has created the hyper-partisanship, the gridlock in Washington that is preventing things from getting done in the interest of the American people. And so only a national commission will be able to solve what's happened here in Maryland, or what's happened similarly in Virginia, where a Republican legislature has drawn that map. Governors alone in those states, which are of the opposite party of their legislature, are not going to be able to solve this. They're not going to have the credibility, and it's something that we need to do going forward. I grew up in California. I went to college to Stanford University out there before I moved to Washington in 1975. California solved it. Other states have. This country needs to solve it.
Thank you, Ms. Matthews. Delegate Gutierrez gets a slightly differently worded question because she had to cast a vote on this, unlike everybody who's spoken so far. So why did you vote against this redistricting map, given that Maryland was one of the few states where Democrats were in a position to squeeze out a new district in response to Republican successes in gaining many more districts by gerrymandering in Texas and Virginia?
Because this is really beyond principle for me, it becomes personal. I've been involved with Montgomery County and have seen the demographic changes that we've had over many years. The Constitution says every 10 years there shall be a census, and you will see what is the makeup of your representation and who needs to be represented in the various levels of government. Montgomery County has become a minority-majority district. It is equally represented by Latinos, Asians, and African Americans. Yet, when the map was being prepared, the only value that was proposed by those who were making the map was incumbency protection. That's not what I wanted. My incumbency is protected by the voters. So I and 4 other women, 2 Latinas, 2 African American women, went against leadership, and we paid for it. But it was very important for it to stand up when it counted.
So, thank you, Delegate Gutierrez. So now for the next 2 respondents, Senator Raskin and Delegate Barve, they both voted in favor of the map that we're discussing. So the question for them is, okay, you've heard everybody else on this stage so far, except Mr. Bowling, who hasn't responded yet, has said that they would place idealism over crass political partisan pragmatism. You chose the latter, and we got a lampoon, the state got lampooned for having the ugliest map in the country. How do you defend placing pragmatism or partisan pragmatism over idealism on these votes?
Well, Bob, I think we need to get real about this. Every redistricting is a gerrymandering when the politicians are choosing the voters before the voters choose the politicians. So if you're going to say you're not going to vote for it, you would never vote for any redistricting. And that's really where we need to go. Here's the idealistic move that I've made, and it's been praised by the Frederick News Post, which endorsed the plan that I've advanced in this session of the legislature, which is called the Potomac Compact. The problem is that the party that's in office has the power to change things, but no incentive. So in Maryland, the Democratic leadership doesn't want to change things. And to be clear, I was not in the inner sanctum that was making any of these decisions. In Republican Virginia, a state that has 2 Democratic U.S. senators, a Democratic governor that Obama won twice, they've got 8 Republican seats and 3 Democratic seats. So let's go together. We've got a Democratic legislature and a Republican governor. They've got a Republican legislature and the Democratic governor. Let's create an interstate compact like the WMATA Compact or the Potomac River Compact, where we create one redistricting commission to do both states. That's going to be the way forward. Now, I've been attacked, and I'll take an extra few seconds because they're attacking me. I've been attacked several times in this campaign by David Trone and by Kathleen Matthews about this issue. Both of them have given thousands of dollars to right-wing Republicans who've participated in gerrymandering plans in their states. So we need to get Democrats and Republicans together. I wonder whether Kathleen would approach Senator Roy Blunt, her friend from Missouri, the anti-choice, anti-birth control Republican, and ask whether he's doing anything about gerrymandering in his state. And I wonder whether Mr. Trone would approach Governor Abbott in Texas, who he's given $40,000 to or more, to see whether he's doing anything about gerrymandering, because we want to create a coalition
Senator,
to get through
enough.
this for real.
Senator, you have to respect the time.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to give 15 seconds each to Mr. Trone and Ms. Matthews to respond to those specific questions addressed to them.
First thing I would start with is the word respect. That's where you start, Jamie. Next point would be, in Texas, we have thousands of employees, and we're working for pro-consumer bills like Sunday sales, wine tastings, good things. Not a dollar for tax breaks, not a dollar for anything, only the consumer. And that's money well spent.
Ms. Matthews?
I want very much to see a Democratic president in Hillary Clinton. I want a Democratic Senate and a Democratic House. I have given thousands of dollars to try to elect Democrats across this country. In my entire career, I've given one donation to one Republican who worked as a bipartisan colleague on a piece of legislation that created thousands of jobs in this country. And I saluted both sponsors of that bill, a Democrat and Republican, because I think we need to build bridges and we need to work together.
Who was the Republican?
The Republican was Roy Blunt of Missouri. He worked with Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar, who led a bill and couldn't get it through unless she worked with him on that piece of legislation that created hundreds of thousands of jobs in the travel industry during the economic downturn.
I don't want this to become like a Republican debate.
No, Bob, could I get 15 seconds on this?
No,
on
you
this
were not
question?
specifically named, I'm sorry.
use my time.
Delegate Barbe, back to the original question. You voted in favor of the map. You placed partisan pragmatism over idealism. How do you defend that vote?
First of all, let me say that a national commission is a non-starter because the Constitution of the United States gives exclusively to state governments the ability to do redistricting. Number one. Number two, I wanted to give Western Maryland an opportunity to have anywhere from a moderate Republican to a moderate Democratic member of Congress, and this map did that. Number three, the people of Maryland upheld this map at the ballot. And number four, I agree with Senator Raskin that we have to move in a bipartisan manner with Virginia for two reasons. Number one, it's the practical way to solve the problem. And by the way, to not do that would be to permanently institutionalize a Republican majority in the House of Representatives. And number two, we need to create an example that other pairs of states around the nation can use as an example. The only way this will be solved is in a bipartisan, multi-state fashion. To say otherwise is to misunderstand the way the Constitution operates.
Okay, thank you, Delegate Barbe. And now Dan Bowling, who has joined us. The original question for those of you who didn't have to take a vote, would you have opposed the map or supported it, and why?
I would always oppose it. But we need to correct the record. The first Article 1, Section 4 of the Constitution allows the states to determine the places, the manner, and time of elections unless Congress asserts its superior authority to do so. That's right. And so, in fact, Kumar is a little bit off base. The Constitution does allow the Congress to set the places, times, and manners of congressional elections. So a national change is, in fact, in the works, and your Congressman John Delaney has a bill in Congress right now, which I will support, to get rid of gerrymandering nationwide, to have everybody have a vote in the primaries, Republicans, Democrats, and most importantly, independents and unaffiliated who in Maryland help to pay the cost of elections but are locked out from taking part. On my website, though, is a procedure by which independents and affiliated can legally vote on April 26th in this primary.
Thank you, Mr. Bowling. So now we'll go to the next question, which is about trade, and we'll be starting with Mr. Anderson for this round. Do you or do you not support the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, and what are your reasons for that? And then briefly, in general, do you think past free trade agreements such as NAFTA were positive or negative for the U.S. economy? Mr. Anderson.
Right. Yes, I support the TPP. The issue here basically is, are we going to be engaged in the world, especially in Asia? Are we going to be engaged in the global economy, or are we going to retreat? Now, any trade deal has issues between the environmentalists and the labor groups on the one hand, and those thinking primarily about the economy, jobs on the other hand. It is not an option for the United States now to retreat from the global economy. If we retreat, then we watch China be the chief economic force not only in Asia but throughout the world. If we want to sell cars to Vietnam, and we do, then we need the TPP so that China does not have access to sell the cars. In terms of past trade agreements, there are always arguments on both sides. Overall, I support the Clinton NAFTA, and I support the Obama administration TPP. It's President Obama's initiative. It's not a Republican initiative. It's the president's initiative.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Yes, it is President Obama's initiative, but many Democrats, I mean, we're seeing in the presidential race that many Democrats are critical of it, and the opposition to free trade is a fundamental part of Bernie Sanders' strength. So I think it's a valid question for Democrats.
It is. I'm just pointing out that it is the initiative of the President of the United States. It is not an initiative of the Republican
Yeah, but it has a lot of
Party.
Republican support.
It does.
Okay.
Right.
I'm being partisan here in the questioning because this is a Democratic primary debate. I mean, I'll be talking in Republican terms in the next round. Will Jawando.
Thank you. I would categorically oppose the current form of the TPP for a number of reasons. And again, I've worked with President Obama in the Senate and in the White House. I often say I wasn't just drinking the Kool-Aid, I was pouring the sugar and stirring. So I'm a fan of the President's on a lot of other issues, but this one, we're not quite there yet. A couple things. You've seen the decline in wages in this country. I worked for Senator Sherrod Brown as well. I think he has a great stance on trade on a lot of these issues. We cannot let people with crappy, for lack of a better word, labor and environmental standards pass these trade agreements that are going to lower prices, put people in indentured servitude or slavery in other countries, and then hurt American workers here, which is what CAFTA and NAFTA have done in large part. So I am for free trade. We do need free trade. We cannot be isolationists. I would agree that. But you can't pass these things with 12, 15 countries where you know people are going to get abused on the back end. So I think we need to try to go back and redo this agreement with more congressional intervention.
Thank you, Mr. Jawando. Joel Rubin.
As a committed internationalist and someone who was part of the State Department promoting the Trade Promotion Authority legislation, I had serious qualms at the time, and I would oppose it as it is currently, and there's a core reason why. We do need to be engaged in the world, and we are engaged in the world. It's not an either-or proposition. There are ways to get this right. Right now, we have an economy that is not working for everyone. It's only working for the wealthy and the CEOs, and that is not good enough. We have real leverage. These agreements are multifaceted. They take years to negotiate. We have time to get it right. I was endorsed by Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky, who is also a committed internationalist, who also is very concerned about the labor protections, the environmental protections, the human rights protections in this. And I sat in the briefings, helped organize the briefings on Capitol Hill with the House, with both sides of the aisle, and it was clear that this was not a settled discussion. It needs to go forward, but in the right way.
Thank you, Mr. Rubin. Kathleen Matthews.
I worked for a global hotel company based in Maryland for 9 years, so I know we live in a global economy, and I also know that 95% of the world's consumers live outside the United States. But I also know that we've seen unintended consequences with past trade agreements where American jobs have been lost and we've not increased our exports. So before I finally decide on this, I want to wait to see what the International Trade Commission reports in May. They're going to be they've done real intensive hearings on this because, number one, I do believe that we need a mix in our economy of not only service jobs but also manufacturing jobs. And there are concerns that we will lose manufacturing jobs with this particular TPP agreement. That said, we are also going to be lifting other economies of the world, and that's good for the world, to rise the economies of other nations, because that makes a stronger globe for all of us. We also would be creating great relationships with Japan, Vietnam, a lot of these countries against China, and that's an important thing to consider. So all of these things have to be part of the mix. I've got deep concerns, but I also see real benefits of this agreement, and I'm going to wait to see what those ITC reports show before making a final decision on this. You got to be thoughtful about these things in this day and age.
Thank you, Ms. Matthews. Delegate Gutierrez.
I am very much opposed to the TPP because I've seen what CAFTA has done to Central America. We have not learned the lessons, and we have not made changes. 80% of the provisions are exactly the same as from previous trade agreements. These are trade agreements that violate sovereign decisions on protecting environment, on protecting labor. They ship good jobs out of the United States. And specifically, I can tell you what happened in El Salvador as a result of CAFTA. The Pacific Rim Canadian company wanted to mine gold and was ready to contaminate 70% of the drinking water in the country. And the agreement, the contract had been signed by a corrupt government, and when it was challenged and taken to Paris by an independent private group of mediators, they, of course, defended the contract. We cannot have that be the way that we move forward with trade. We have to have fair trade. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. Senator Raskin.
In principle, international trade is a fantastic good for the reason that the 18th century liberals like Adam Smith and David Ricardo figured out a long time ago. The law of comparative advantage, and it rises all of the economies together. In practice today, large multinational corporations have been using the international trade agreements to drive down labor, environmental, workplace, and other social protections that we've built. We've certainly seen that with NAFTA, which has cost us hundreds of thousands of jobs since that treaty was adopted. Today, under this agreement, American workers are going to be pitted against workers in Vietnam, where there are no free trade unions. Everything's controlled by the Communist Party, by the state, and workers are making less than $1 an hour. So I'm for free and fair trade agreements, and our party has got to write those and fight for those, because if not, we're going to get Donald Trump and the new fascistic impulse in the Republican Party pandering to people and exploiting people's economic anxiety about what's taking place. Trump is taking an anti-trade line because there are real problems with the trade agreements, and if we don't do this as a progressive party, they're going to do it as a right-wing racist party.
Pardon me, would you support or oppose the TPP?
Oppose it.
You're
Oppose it in the current guise.
Pardon me. Thank you, Senator Raskin. Delegate Barve.
Yes, thank you. I oppose the TPP, and let me explain why that is. Before I served in the Maryland General Assembly, I was for 10 years a contract negotiator, and I see these agreements as contracts. Now, I supported NAFTA and GATT, and part of the reason that I did was a promise was made to the workers of the United States that those of you who lost your job would get training for a new job, and in every instance, that promise was broken. So my philosophy is this. As I said in my opening statement, there are 4 million unfilled jobs in the American economy. We need to train American workers for these good-paying, middle-skilled jobs, fill those first, and then engage in international trade agreements. Because think about this logically. If we are to negotiate from a position of strength, and if we are to enrich our economy, we have to have an economic base that makes us capable of competing in Asia before we open up those agreements.
Thank you, Delegate. Dan Bowling.
I think it's a red flag when the TPP allows corporations to sue sovereign governments over what they see as harm from the TPP, but trade unions are prohibited from doing so. The enforcement provisions in the law are probably better than any previous trade agreement in writing, but the problem is actually enforcing those provisions, and there's a very lousy record of being able to enforce the provisions that would protect the environment and protect workers' rights. I'm opposed to the TPP. I do believe that there's a great lesson to be learned from people like Nick Hanauer, who's you can find on my website under the Income Inequality tab, who makes a very concise, literate argument that the economy depends upon a strong middle class, that the middle class are the job creators, and that we need to pay higher wages in order to strengthen the real job creators who are the middle class.
Thank you, Mr. Bowling. David Trone.
I strongly support the TPP. We need to be involved as the world's leader in trade. Long term, the history shows clearly these agreements, while never perfect for anyone, have lifted the world across the board, have created more prosperity across the board. So we can nitpick and complain, but at the end of the day, we have to move forward. I operate my business, and we buy products from 110 countries around the world. We trade everywhere. It's important that we have connectivity throughout the world in leadership. And we should fight against Republicans right now, Mitch McConnell, who because of tobacco lobbyists, and Orrin Hatch, because of Big Pharma, their lobbyists, are currently holding up the president's initiative. And once again, it talks about the corrosive efforts of the lobbyists and big money in politics to help the world and help Americans.
Thank you, Mr. Trone. Okay, now we'll move on to a rather high-minded question about how you would approach difficult decisions as a member of Congress. But before I give you that question, I've got a note. There's concern that we're taking longer than we would like, and we're running out of time. So we're going to now reduce the time for responses to 45 seconds. 45 seconds, starting now. So the question is, the League of Women Voters this is their question, and they thought this was the most important question to ask. And we will be beginning with Will Jawando. And they said, would you support a bill, even if your party, that is your party leadership, is against it? And what would you do in that case to round up support from your colleagues?
So say that one more time, I'm sorry. Would I support a bill?
Would you support a bill, even if your party, and specifically the party leadership, is against it? And what would you do to gather support from your colleagues opposing something that your party was against?
Great question. I think it's a core issue in this campaign because a lot of us will agree on a lot. I would support a bill even if I believed in it and I thought it was the right thing to do, even if party leadership was against it. Give you an example of that. When I worked in the Senate for Senator Obama and Sherrod Brown, in 2007 we had the immigration bill on the floor, and Senator Kennedy was shepherding that bill. And Sherrod Brown unfortunately voted against it. I was his judiciary staffer, counseled him otherwise up to the floor. If I could have voted, I walked him down to the well itself and counseled him otherwise because of how strongly I believed on it. I think in this race you have to ask some difficult questions. There was a bill to end life sentences for juveniles that Senator Raskin voted against last session, and many Democrats and others supported it. And it was something that leadership didn't want to have to deal with. Now there's 16 juveniles in the state of Maryland that are serving life sentences that cannot apply for parole. And I think that's an issue in this race, and which will help people decide who's going to stand for what when they're in Congress.
Thank you, Mr. Jawando. Joel Rubin?
I don't think anyone should be elected to Congress if they're not willing to stand up to their party leadership. They represent the people that vote them in. One example of when I was able to work on Capitol Hill as a Senate staffer for then Senator Frank Laudenberg was to promote a bill to help victims of terrorism to get compensation from those who perpetrated the acts. It was very controversial at the time. He did it because he represented constituents in New Jersey who had suffered from attacks by Hezbollah. Well, we fought for a year and a half, 2 years to get that done. We built coalitions with Republicans, with outside activists, with the victims themselves, and we beat back big oil, we beat back the Bush administration, we beat back Republicans who didn't want to see individuals get compensated. It can be done. Eventually the leadership came on board when they saw essentially they had no choice.
Thank you, Mr. Rubin. Kathleen Matthews?
Implicit in this question is why I'm running for Congress, because I am tired of the gridlock, and the gridlock is because people only stick with their party line and they won't talk to each other. They're not thoughtful about these things. As a reporter, I would talk to people on all sides of an issue. It's implicit in what I do and what is in my DNA today. That said, I'm a progressive Democrat, and I'm going to fight for progressive democratic values. But I also know that to get anything done, you've got to build consensus. And that's what I did for 9 years working at Marriott International, a big global company with 300,000 employees and a big corporate executive team. And I was a progressive voice in a pretty conservative company advocating for more diversity, LGBT equality, and also the environment, and getting things done because I was able to reach across the aisle and make the business case.
Thank you, Ms. Matthews. Delegate Gutierrez.
I love this question from my sisters in the League of Women Voters. I was honored to be selected by them to carry forth a bill 2 years ago that would have set standards for redistricting. It was a minimum bill, but it was a first step in the right direction. It would have set the same standards that we have for our legislative districts into the congressional districts. You know what happened to that bill? It went into rules, and it got stuck and never saw the light of day. Those are the kind of practices that I absolutely will not ever support, and I have not supported. The fact that leadership can, through rules, avoid taking action on serious issues is something that cannot be tolerated, and I will not tolerate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Gutierrez. Senator Raskin.
I have bucked party leadership from the very beginning of my career. They didn't want me to run against a 32-year incumbent who was president pro tem of the Senate. When I championed marriage equality, the president of the Senate voted against it. When I championed abolition of the death penalty, the president of the Senate voted against it. I went against leadership for many of the most important victories I won. But let me give you a couple of hometown examples here. When I got in, I learned that Marylanders could not have wine shipped to their homes. I couldn't believe it. You can have a car shipped to your home. Well, it turns out that Big Liquor had set it up, so everybody had to go to a liquor store in order to get wine shipped to their home. So I said, with the Western Maryland senators, I'm going to put in a bill to help the local wineries because they couldn't have wine shipped out if wine couldn't be shipped in. At first, it was just me and a bunch of conservative Republicans. The next year, we doubled the number of people. We brought some Democrats. In the third year, we had 25 co-sponsors. And if you don't remember anything else about me, remember I'm the guy who brought you direct wine shipment in the state of Maryland. So.
Thank you, Senator Raskin. Delegate Barvey.
Well, I am House leadership, and it's going to be my objective to win this race and to climb into the ranks of leadership just as quickly as Chris Van Hollen did so that I can serve you better. Now, on occasion, I have disagreed with leadership, but let's be clear about something. We have gridlock because we have a Republican majority, not for any other reason. And let me also... And as a Democratic Party leader, I will work within our majority caucus to move forward initiatives like a ban of fracking, which I got done last year in the Maryland General Assembly. And so, you know, I think it's occasionally I will disagree with my true blue Democratic Party leadership, but in most cases I won't because we're right.
Thank you, Delegate. Dan Bowling.
The Atlantic and NPR and Politico have brought us really, really good news on this score. How many people here know that Nebraska has a unicameral legislature? Anybody? I knew it. Now, how many of you knew that it's also nonpartisan? The unicameral is not the story. In Nebraska, you have a red state that elects Democrats to chair committees. Sometimes they elect a Democratic speaker. Last year, in Nebraska, they increased the minimum wage. They increased the gas tax for roads and bridges. They looked around and saw all these illegal kids, they didn't call them undocumented, driving without insurance, and they gave them driver's licenses. They also limited the death penalty, and then the governor vetoed, and they had to override the governor's veto. And people said, you guys aren't really Republicans, are you? And they said, no, we're Republicans, but there's no party bosses telling us how to vote. We have to think things through. Democrats have more evidence-based policy. When moderate Republicans are free to think about things instead of voting party line, they tend to vote for Democratic ideals. That's what happens when you take out the majority of the minority leader and you have a nonpartisan legislature. And we're going to do that in Congress, believe it or not. I know you don't believe it, but look at the Atlantic and
Mr.
Politico
Bowling,
and
please.
NPR.
You've gone over your time.
On my website. Thank you.
David Trone.
Just to bring a little humor to the room, I am the largest retailer of wine in America. My company is. So I know a little bit about wine. So, yes, Mr. Raskin's right. We support wine shipping in Maryland. We think it's great. We support it all over the country. It's great. Maryland was the 42nd state to allow wine shipping. I probably wouldn't call that leadership or quickly jumping on the bandwagon. I'd call that, we did beat Mississippi and Alabama. End of the day, I would fight leadership in a heartbeat. Our number one, while I'm the largest DNC contributor in the country last year, I'm an American first. That's what counts. What's right for America, Republican or Democrat, and if we have to stand up and fight, we do it to the bitter end.
Thank you, Mr. Trone. David Anderson.
The answer is definitely yes. I mean, in this campaign, I have adopted many policies which differentiate me from the others. It is essentially 8 establishment liberals against me. I've been called the lone dissenting voice. The centerpiece of my campaign bucks the Democratic Party and everyone on this stage. Hard-working, young, middle-class families should get a choice. 6 months of paid leave, $10,000 of child care support for 3 years, or, and this is what's distinctive, you'll not find any Democrat say this, 6 months of paid parental leave and a $10,000 tax credit for a stay-at-home mom or a stay-at-home dad. I am the only person in this race, and so far as I know, the only candidate in the United States who has stood up for stay-at-home parents for economic support. And those families also include families with 2 moms and 2 dads.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. So now we're going to have one more question from the original list, from the league and the students and me, and then we'll go to questions from the audience. But one more on foreign policy, on Iran and Israel, and we'll be starting with Mr. Rubin. Do you support President Obama's nuclear agreement with Iran, or do you agree with Israeli Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu that it was a major mistake and a threat to Israel? And in general, going forward, what should our foreign policy be with Iran? Mr. Rubin.
So I was advocating for diplomacy with Iran as a leading activist as early as 8 years ago when I helped to found J Street, which is a progressive organization dedicated to supporting Israeli security and diplomacy. And we fought hard for 6 years. I led an outside campaign to build political support for it, and I was appointed to the administration to help sell a deal to the House of Representatives, and we won on that deal, and we made sure that American security came first. And I am very clear-minded on this. We do not want Iran to have a bomb. We do not want another war in the Middle East. There is no better alternative than the deal we have now, and I will fight every day to keep that deal in place.
Thank you, Mr. Rubin. Kathleen Matthews.
I salute Joel for the work he did in trying to get that deal passed because it was hard work, and I agree with him. I think that that deal with Iran is the best pathway to keep a nuclear bomb out of a country that clearly has ambitions in the Middle East and in that region. And so we've got to be watchdogs of Iran. We've got to make sure that they, to the letter, obey that deal. And that's going to be a very tough job that is going to be on the hands of this next Congress to make sure that if there is any violation that we snap back to the sanctions that will make sure that we keep a nuclear bomb out of the hands of Iran. And I do believe going forward we've got to work very hard to support the peace process in the Middle East between Israel and the Palestinian territories to get a 2-state solution. I had a chance to be in Israel over the Christmas and New Year's holidays, meeting with Bibi Netanyahu. This is the only pathway towards peace is a 2-state solution.
Thank you, Ms. Matthews. Delegate Gutierrez.
I am a very strong supporter of the Iran deal. We need to focus on diplomacy versus war in settling conflicts. I'm a member of the board of an organization of women legislators and other progressive women called Will Wand. We work for ensuring that there will be a peaceful solution to conflict in the world. And our initiative is Women, Peace, and Security. That is also, I think, an important focus that we need to have to make sure that women are at the seat of the table, making decisions. We are urging Congress to ensure that we have a protected role for women after we leave Afghanistan, if we ever leave. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Gutierrez. Senator Raskin.
I favored the nuclear agreement with Iran because it cuts off a uranium pathway to the bomb, it cuts off a plutonium pathway to the bomb, and it creates snapback sanctions that are there within our own unilateral discretion if we decide that they have violated the agreement. Let's be clear that the Iranian government is an autocratic, theocratic state that is a nightmare, a human rights nightmare for the people who live there. It's the leading administrator of the death penalty and executions on earth per capita. And it has been making lots of trouble with Hamas, with Hezbollah, even in Argentina and Buenos Aires, where it was implicated in the explosion at the Jewish Community Center. I am a strong supporter of human rights and security in Israel. I was over in Israel myself in December visiting not Netanyahu. I didn't get to see him, but I saw my relatives there, and I am a big champion for continued diplomacy and discussions to get to a 2-state solution.
Thank you, Senator Raskin. Delegate Barve.
Thank you. I'm a strong supporter of the Iran nuclear deal for all the reasons you've heard. It's a good deal for America. It's a good deal for Israel. It serves the interests of peace. But I think it's important for us to step back and remember what America's role as a leader should be. We negotiated tough deals with the Soviet Union and the People's Republic of China, nations that are every bit as bad as Iran. And I think we need to remember the words of President Kennedy when he said we should never negotiate out of fear, but we should never fear to negotiate.
Thank you, Delegate Barve. Dan Bowling.
You know, what a delight to hear wisdom from every person on this panel on the Iran nuclear deal, and we think we're all in agreement on it.
Yeah, it was a lousy question.
Not yet.
Just wait.
But
Just
I
wait.
apologize.
I would like
Great
to
question.
add one little perspective that I haven't heard, and that is, you know, the Iranians are somewhat schizophrenic. You have